Welcome to this explainer. Right at this very second, your body is a fortress under constant siege from microscopic pathogens. It's a silent, epic battle happening every single day. So today, we're going to trace the exact step-by-step journey of one of those invaders as it tries to breach your innate defenses. Here's our battle map for today. We'll start with the two-tiered defense, move to physical barriers, detecting the invader, the cellular cavalry, chemical warfare, and finally, look at what happens when these vital mechanisms actually fail.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the two-tiered defense.
Before we track our invader, we really need to lay down the baseline rules of engagement. There is a massive critical difference in timing between our two main immune systems. The innate immune system is our rapid response unit. It kicks into gear within minutes to hours of an infection. The adaptive system, utilizing B and T lymphocytes, is incredibly effective, but it takes actual days to mobilize its targeted weapons. The big trade-off you need to understand is this. Your innate system is always on. It's ready to fight microbes immediately without needing any formal introduction. But its diversity is pretty limited, and it has absolutely zero memory. It will fight the same bacteria the exact same way 100 times over. The adaptive system is much slower, but highly specific, and it remembers. So the next time that specific invader shows up, the response is massive.
Moving right along to Section 2, first-line physical barriers.
Long before our immune cells ever have to grab their weapons, invaders hit a literal wall of physical and microbiological barriers. We've got skin, using keratin to create a super tough outer surface. Down on our respiratory tract, tiny hair-like structures called cilia are constantly sweeping away debris. And you can't forget the sheer scale of our natural flora. We have roughly 100 trillion beneficial bacteria living just in our lower intestine. They essentially hog all the space and nutrients, completely outcompeting any harmful bacteria trying to set up camp.
All right, Section 3, detecting the invader. So what happens when a bug actually breaches those physical walls? How do the biological security alarms go off? Well, our innate immune cells need a way to tell friend from foe, right? They do this by sniffing out PAMPs, or pathogen-associated molecular patterns. Think of PAMPs as exclusive little molecular name tags that only microbes wear. To read these tags, our immune cells are equipped with pattern recognition receptors. The most famous of these are toll-like receptors, or TLRs, which act just like biological barcode scanners. When they scan a PAMP, boom, the alarm is sounded.
This barcode scanning system is so vital to our survival that just a tiny genetic glitch can cause havoc. If you have a slight variation, just a couple of swapped amino acids in one of these receptors, like TLR4, your susceptibility to certain infections shoots up. In fact, carriers of a specific TLR4 mutation face an approximately threefold increased risk of certain severe bacterial infections, all because their cellular barcode scanners are a bit hypo-responsive.
Which brings us to Section 4, the cellular cavalry. Once those TLR alarms are ringing, it's time to call in the first responders. The absolute workhorses here are the neutrophils. They make up 70% of circulating leukocytes, multiply incredibly fast during an infection, and are packed with granules designed to completely wreck bacteria. Then you've got monocytes. While there are fewer of them floating around the blood, they are super important because they migrate into your damaged tissues and actually mature into macrophages, the giant Pac-Man-like cleanup crew that eats microbes and starts repairing the tissue. But what if the threat is hiding inside our own cells, like a virus or a tumor? For those sneaky intracellular threats, our standard foot soldiers just aren't enough. That's when we rely on natural killer, or NK cells. These are targeted cellular assassins. If a host cell isn't displaying the proper self-tags, the NK cell will destroy the infected cell entirely. And it does this completely innately, without needing a single antibody. For bacteria that are caught out in the open, macrophages and neutrophils use a totally wild four-step process called phagocytosis. First, the microbe binds to the cell's receptors. Next, the cell's membrane literally zips up around the microbe, completely swallowing it into a little bubble called a phagosome. Finally, that bubble fuses with a lysosome, which floods the chamber with reactive oxygen species and nitric oxide. It essentially chemically digests the invader alive.
Now for Section 5, inflammation and chemical warfare.
As the cellular battle heats up, the surrounding tissue environment goes through some extreme changes. We've all experienced acute inflammation, maybe around a cut or a sutured wound. It looks red and painful, but it's actually fantastic news. It's the visual proof that your innate immune system is working perfectly, actively dragging essential reinforcements straight from the bloodstream right onto the battlefield.
The redness, the swelling, the heat, and the pain? You can thank your mast cells for that. When they detect microbial products, they dump histamine into the area. That histamine forces your local blood vessels to dilate and become highly permeable. All that increased blood flow brings the heat and redness, while the fluid leaking into your tissues causes the swelling and the resulting pain.
To coordinate this massive, chaotic response, tissue macrophages release cytokines. Think of cytokines as the radio communicators of the immune system. Tumor necrosis factor and interleukin-1 stimulate local inflammation and can even travel all the way to your brain's hypothalamus to trigger a full-body fever. Meanwhile, chemokines act like chemical flares, recruiting more backup directly to the site of the infection.
Alongside those cytokines, we've got one of the most ruthless weapons in the innate arsenal, the complement cascade. This is a chain reaction of circulating proteins that, when triggered by a microbe, assemble into a literal cylinder called the membrane attack complex. This complex punches a hole directly through the microbe's outer membrane, causing it to just burst apart.
Finally, Section 6, when defense mechanisms fail.
Now that we've seen this brilliant, multi-layered defense in action, we have to ask, what happens when it breaks down? Because this is our absolute first line of defense. A failure at literally any single stage of the invader's journey has severe, lifelong clinical consequences. It leaves the body incredibly vulnerable.
Let's look at a failure right at the front door. Take Cardigener syndrome, a condition affecting about 1 in 32,000 live births. If a person lacks functional respiratory cilia, those tiny sweeping hairs we talked about, the consequences are immediate. Without that physical barrier clearing debris, the patient will suffer from chronic bronchitis and recurrent, highly dangerous bouts of pneumonia.
Or what if the cellular cavalry itself fails? In chronic granulomatous disease, or CGD, a patient has a genetic deficiency that prevents them from producing reactive oxygen intermediates. So their macrophages can successfully swallow the bacteria, but they completely lack the chemical bleach needed to actually kill it. This tragically leaves the patient facing endless, repeated bacterial and fungal infections.
But here is the major silver lining. By breaking down these exact pathways, just like we've done in this explainer, modern medicine has created some incredible targeted therapies. We can now artificially trigger or suppress our innate responses. We use a drug called Imicmode to intentionally trip the TLR7 alarm to help fight skin cancer. Or we use IL-1 receptor antagonist to block excessive inflammation when the system gets dangerously out of control.
Our innate system holds the line every single day, keeping us safe in a world literally covered in microscopic threats. But knowing how this generalized response works leaves us with a massively provocative question for next time. After the innate cells clean up the battlefield, how exactly do they pass their vital intelligence to the adaptive immune system, ensuring we become permanently immune to that specific invader for life? Well, that is a journey for another explainer. Thank you so much for learning with us today.